Hey guys, welcome back to the Prehistoric Life podcast. I'm your host, Eric Crawford, and today we have another interview. Would you like to introduce yourself?
G'day folks, my name's Jake. I'm a PhD candidate at Monash University and Museum Victoria Research Institute. I'm down in Victoria in Australia. I like theropod dinosaurs, particularly from Australia. And Eric's asked me to come on and have a chat about some of the stuff I work on down here.
So there's his Instagram if you want to go check it out. He has a lot of amazing content. I would recommend you go check him out.
I'm terrible at keeping up to date with it, but I do my best. I'm a tech boomer. I can't do this stuff well.
The first question that I usually start off every interview with is, what is your favorite dinosaur?
Giganotosaurus.
Really?
I like big predatory dinosaurs, and it's the biggest of the big. I have several answers for this question. I started out with T-Rex because of Jurassic Park, but T-Rex is like everyone's favorite dinosaur. For an Australian dinosaur, I have Australopetra because it's our one and only really good theropod. But like as an overall favorite, it's Giganotosaurus. I've got a soft spot for Carcharodontosaurs, and it's just an awesome animal, and I'd love to see more done on it in the future.
Carcharodontosaurus lineage altogether is just a beautiful one.
Oh, they're just ridiculous. Just the size that they acquire well before the Tyrannosaurs even bother to show up is just fantastic.
And especially, I was really surprised that you said one from South America, considering you're the Australian theropod guy.
Look, I mean, through the course of this PhD, I'm 3 and a bit years in, so I finish up this year. But through the course of it, I've kind of gotten a bit of, I guess, pride and I don't know, something with Gondwana dinosaurs in particular. And because South American and Australian dinosaurs are so intimately tied, there's a bit of pride in that. And I really like the Gondwana lineages. Like so many people, particularly down here when you give talks, the kids in particular know North American or Northern Hemisphere dinosaurs. The first ones to spring to mind is always T-Rex, Triceratops, Stegosaurus, etc. And nobody, like, we're learning, and South American dinosaurs in particular are coming into the mainstream a bit more, but no one really knows Aussie dinosaurs. So there's just, I don't know, there's something in that. And we don't have a big predator here, nothing of that size. So naturally I'll gravitate to the South American giants.
So, I mean, I guess just what is it that you do?
Fair enough. So I pretty much started this PhD with the intent of reviewing the record of theropod material at Museum of Victoria. So we have been collecting fossils down here for about 40 years almost on coastlines, and we get lots and lots of small isolated bits. We're in an environment that used to be a massive river. Think of something like the Ganges, the Amazon, etc. It's at least 1 kilometer across. It's a minimum 30 meters deep. And this was in the Rift Valley between Australia and Tasmania, and by extension Antarctica, as the continents rifted apart in the middle of the Cretaceous. So you got this fast-flowing, high-energy water environment. And often we either have animals that have died, fallen in, gotten bashed across on the sides of the bank and become disarticulated, or we've had oxbow lakes form and then the river's diverted, plowed through all that material, jumbled it up and deposited it. So we get a lot of isolated broken bits. Now, theropod material, of course, is really, really fragile. So we don't really get articulated specimens at all. We have 2 published examples, which is a pair of pubic bones and a pair of tail vertebrae, and that's it. So my PhD effectively started out with reviewing that record. We have, I don't know, about 40 specimens published on, but there's at least 250 just sitting in the collection. With a lot of them are actually quite useful, at least for determining, what clades are present. It won't tell me much about an overall animal, but like with my recent work this year, we were able to identify Carcharodontosaurs in Australia and unenlarging dromaeosaurs. So we now know that they're in Australia. So it's really important for overall diversity rather than individual animals. But through the course of my PhD, I've also gone up to New South Wales in Lightning Ridge, where we get opalized dinosaurs, and had a look at lightning claw. It's an indeterminate Megaraptorid from down here. And I've also been up to Winton in central Queensland, where I saw Australopetra. So now, I guess a core part of my PhD is the evolution and distribution of the Megaraptorids throughout Australia. So I work on theropods in Australia, and we get a lot of Megaraptors. So by extension, I've become a specialist in Megaraptors.
So, I mean, what can you share about Megaraptors, particularly in Australia, I guess?
Yeah, fair enough. For those who don't know what megaraptors are, they're a weird lineage of theropods. They're defined by really pneumatic vertebrae, large claws, relatively for their size, and kind of elongate gracile snouts with relatively small teeth. You get the early diverging ones in Southeast Asia, so Thailand and Japan, we think. And then you get the derived group, the Megaraptorids, only in Australia and South America. Their phylogeny is an absolute mess, and what is and isn't a Megaraptoran is where they sit. Yeah, so they've been considered part of Neovenatoridae, which is Carcharodinosaurs and Allosaurs. They've been considered just early branching Coelurosaurs. They've been considered early branching Tyrannosauroids, which is funny because if they are Tyrannosaurs, then you have that lineage going into big heads, small hands, small heads, big hands. Whatever they are, the earliest, like the first time you see them in the geologic record is actually here in Victoria about 121 or so million years ago. And then you get them in New South Wales. You get them on the other side of the Victorian coastline about 110 million years. Then you get them in New South Wales about 100 and Queensland about 95. And then our record, we don't really have anything beyond that in Australia, just the way our deposits and our landscape is. But you see them in South America from about 90 till the end of the Cretaceous. So based on the fossil record, it looks like they originate here. They disperse throughout Australia, but they also go through Antarctica into South America and become, quite successful over there as well. Evolving, more elongate forearm claws than even our ones. So one good comparator is the length of the claw, the first claw, to the ulna. And in Australominida, the claw is about 50% of the length of the ulna. Whereas in Megaraptor, it exceeds the length of the ulna. So these guys get really wicked, massive claws.
Just taking the Jurassic Park stereotype of velociraptors to the next level.
I'd argue that they're a more intimidating thing than a Dromaeosaurus.
Oh, absolutely.
But that's just me. I mean, these guys, if they do get to that size, like May at the end of the Cretaceous, if they get to 10 meters long, that's terrifying.
You mentioned that they went through Antarctica. They were on Australia, but went through Antarctica. Do you think there's any, not alive, but do you think there's species in Antarctica that I reckon it's a matter of time that we find one. We've got pretty clear distribution between the two continents. So, we've got Megaraptorids going through. We've got my supervisor, Steve Poropat, works on sauropods, and he's demonstrated the Diamantinosaurian sauropods, things like Sarmientosaurus over there and Diamantinosaurus here, going through interchange. You've got the Parankylosaurs, so things like, do you remember Stegurus, that I think it's Chilean, that ankylosaur with the really whack Mayan club tail? Absolutely, I do. Yeah, you've got that is in a clade theory, supposedly with Kunbarasaurus, which is our best known ankylosaur, and Antarctopelta, the Antarctic ankylosaur. We've got elasmerian ornithopods. Like beyond that, there's so many other groups. I think it's a matter of time that a Megaraptorid shows up in Antarctica. Yeah, honestly, because we have Krylophosaurus, and then there's, like you said, the other ones as well. So, there's obviously stuff there. It's just... how easy it is to access. And speaking from experience, Megaraptorids don't preserve that well. Particularly, I think it has something to do with the really pneumatic vertebrae. Probably don't preserve as well. But even just its theropods. Theropods just don't preserve well. They just got those hollow bones. They break easy. I don't know. Maybe people don't know what they're looking for at the time. We've only known Megaraptorids for about 12 years, Megaraptorans for 15. They're a relatively new group. It's pretty exciting to be on the forefront of them. New. It's good to be on the forefront of them, but I think one will show up in Antarctica at some stage. It might be exciting depending on when the age of the deposit is. If it's something end Cretaceous, then it might hint that we're probably here in the end of the Cretaceous. We just don't have the rock to support it. And then theoretical Megaraptorids in Antarctica would combine those two. It just gives it more support. Yeah, it'll give it more support. We can see that
Australoveneta and Megaraptor are pretty closely tied already. I mean, there's differences, obviously, but there are a lot of similarities as well. And yes, there is probably a South American lineage versus the Australian lineage, but there are very close similarities.
So, I mean, how did you come to become a paleontologist? I mean,
I think we're at the stage. So I'm 31 years old, and I think we're at the stage where most people you ask are going to give you the answer of Jurassic Park. I grew up on Jurassic Park. I watch the movie 5-6 times a year. I read the book once a year. And when I was going through high school, I didn't think paleontology was actually a viable thing in Australia. We just don't hear about it as readily. There were resources, but I grew up in, my parents were divorced. My mum was struggling to raise 3 kids. So we just didn't know. We didn't know where to look. So I gravitated to the other science in Jurassic Park, which was genetics. I did a genetics degree. My heart wasn't in it. Didn't love it. So I kind of got stuck in hospitality working. And then I read Jurassic Park again. I was like, you know what? I'm going to have a look. So I Googled it and I found a paleontology unit at Monash University, where I am now. I ended up doing a second undergraduate in the Earth Sciences department. But then COVID happened and my supervisor took a voluntary separation package. So I was able to do honours with him, but that was the extent. And through that honours project, I met my now PhD supervisor, Steve Poropat, who gave me a lot of help. I ended up working on a sauropod from Morocco, and Steve knows sauropods. So he gave me a hand and he asked me if I'd like to do a PhD. And I was hesitant at first because I've done, 8-9 years of university. I was kind of sick of it. And he's like, nah, well, I was sick of, working and studying. I hated my casual jobs. I just wanted to get out of it. And he's like, no, you can get a scholarship. And just went from there. So he said, yeah, someone needs to work on the theropod record in Victoria. There's a lot to be done. And here we are 3 and a bit years later.
Now you're the Australian theropod guy.
I'm trying to be. There's a couple of people who work on Aussie theropods, but I'm the most vocal, I suppose.
You'll never be alone in the field.
No, it's theropods. They're very popular.
There'll be 3 people to the name at least.
Yeah.
And I mean,
I'm just the loudest one.
From what you've found in the Australian theropods, would you like to just share on that in general?
Yeah, sure. So again, the original intent was to kind of go through everything in the Victorian collection, which I still am working on, but there's a lot that's not really useful. Like I tried to look at, let's say, all the tibia that were preserved, and there were 6, and 2 of them were just shafts. Like, they tell you nothing. So it sort of got to a point where I'd pick out the really informative, the best of the best stuff. So the first one that came onto my plate was a frontal. So the frontal is the bone that sits on top of the brain case, articulates with the nasal, forms part of the snout. In Australia, we don't really get skull bones for theropods. There are now 4 published examples, which is the left and right dentary, so the lower jaw, part of the lower jaw of Australoveneta. There's a probable cerangular of something down here in Victoria, and now a frontal. So it's one of 4 skull bones. It's one of 1 upper skull bones, and it's one of 3 Megaraptorid frontals. So 4, I think. So it was kind of informative because it gave us a glimpse into the frontal of this group 30 million years before the next one. So we could see how they were changing from the more early condition into specialized. We think it's specializing for a more elongate snout with smaller teeth, which by all accounts, if you look at the juvenile Megaraptor specimen, it looks like they're really elongating their snout and bracing for a more gracile snout versus, early branching tyrannosauroids. I think it's hard to say. I think it's something to do with prey acquisition. Carcharodontosaurs and tyrannosaurs are pretty much walking mouths. Like they're hunting with their face. They're hunting with their mouth. Megaraptorids evidently are doing something with their forearms. I don't know how. I had a colleague bring up to me recently who doesn't work on dinosaurs, but was like, it seems weird that the acquisition is, behind the head. Like if you got the neck and the face of the theropod, the hands are still behind it. So it's kind of weird to I don't know. He just had some questions that I wasn't 100% certain I could answer. But Megaraptorid claws are evidently of like specializing for prey acquisition, so they're not as reliant on their skull. I don't know why they're elongating out. There's a group of tyrannosaurs called the Alioramines, things like Alioramus, and
They have a really long skull.
they got that really elongate snout, and it's still robust like a tyrannosaur, but gracile relative to other ones. And there was something in one of those papers, I think by Steve Brisardi, where he said that they were becoming more gracile because they were focusing on smaller prey versus, bone crunching tyrannosaurs. So it may be something to do with that. I have a working hypothesis that my supervisor brought up that maybe Megaraptorids are specialized for elasmerian ornithopods. You get them in every deposit. Haven't seen one in Winton yet, but there are footprints. You don't get anything else other than elasmerian ornithopods, ankylosaurs, and Megaraptorids, really, to hunt them. There are other theropods, but for ornithopods, it's mainly small bipedal ornithopods or ankylosaurs that we see at the minute. So they must be hunting them. They must be working on them. So my working theory is that it's probably because of the prey they're hunting and what they're feeding. They don't need a bone crunch. Just focusing on smaller prey.
I mean, yeah. And I'm sure since Alioramus, that whole lineage was having the same thing, it could be looked at for a
pretty much.
Comparison.
I think in them it was niche partitioning because there are other tyrannosaurs in the deposit. I can't remember which. I'm horrible when it comes to North America. I was focused so much on Gondwana and stuff that I forget all the northern hemisphere stuff at times. But yeah, I think there was something about niche partitioning, but which would work, I guess, in South America because you've got a few places where Megaraptorids are alongside Carcharodontosaurs, or later on Abelisaurids once the Carcharodontosaurs are extinct, and those guys are a bit more, they target larger prey. So
Abelisaurids, indeed,
it probably works out that they're just specializing for smaller prey.
So where did the Megaraptorids come from within South American confines, at least?
That's a weird thing. So the working hypothesis is interchange between Australia and South America. We don't really have, we're very limited in Australia. So our really good Cretaceous record is around the Barremian Aptian, so about 121 million years ago, to the Cenomanian about 95 million years ago to 90. And that's it. So what we call informally the middle Cretaceous. So we don't know what happens before. We don't have a great Jurassic record either. And we don't really know what happens after. So the oldest stuff is down here in Victoria in the Barremian Aptian. And then the earliest Megaraptorids, definitive Megaraptorids in South America is around the Cenomanian Turonian. It's probable that there was interchange. It's most likely that there was interchange, and the fossil record suggests at the minute that they probably originate in Australia and then diversify out. It's hard to say. They had to come from somewhere. They're not anywhere else but South America and Australia. It's probably an Australian origin into South America. It could well be a South American origin and then into Australia. It could well be an Antarctic origin. We don't have the fossils to say anything else at the minute.
It could have been something similar in both and meeting in Antarctica, kind of finalizing it, and then they cross paths.
Yeah, that's at least for the Megaraptorids. Megaraptoride, it gets weird because they're in Southeast Asia, and it seems very strange that they go all the way through within 5 million years, because the earliest ones are 130 or so, and then you start to get them around 125 to 121 in Australia. I don't know. There's such a strange group, and there's so little of them. I mean, not only is there so few taxa, not only are they so recently known, but not a single one of them is more than 20% or so complete. And then there's some that just don't even overlap. Like Trotayennia is just some dorsal and sacral vertebrae and the ilium. And mate is mostly vertebrae and a coracoid. And Australopithecus has none of that. So we can't even compare them directly. I have to use Megaraptor, which then has bits with them, to kind of infer.
It's kind of just a hodgepodge of different sections.
Pretty much. I mean, what we know of Megaraptorids is a composite at the minute. I mean, you take the nasal and the premaxilla and maxilla of Megaraptor. You take the brain case of Megaraptor. You take the dentary of Australorvenida. You take some of the back of the jaw from, I think it's Erosteon, and you just kind of mash them together, and we get an idea of what a Megaraptorid looks like.
It kind of fits, therefore it goes together.
Pretty much. And that's the best we can do at the minute, particularly in Australia. Our records, we just don't preserve theropods that well. I mean, if we're going to start getting better stuff, it'll be up in Winton because they're finding so much good sauropod material. We have 16 specimens, I think, now of Dimentinosaurus, which, there was a week ago or two, I think it was last week, was the gut contents paper that Steve put out. There was the skull paper from a couple of years ago, the brain case paper, new specimens. So we know a lot about Dimentinosaurus. In sauropods in general, so Dimentinosaurus is one of the best known. But then for Australian dinosaurs, it's probably one of the best as well. We don't get theropod stuff like that. Hopefully we start seeing more, but we're not finding a lot other than teeth at the minute.
And of course, sauropods just preserve so much better than anything because they're walking literal pillars. So
yep. And just that limb material is just so readily preserved and just so well preserved. And it just, that's the thing. We don't have Australorvenida is one of one. And for those who don't know Australorvenida, it's most of the hind limbs, most of the forelimbs, and a dentary. No vertebrae, no upper skull. And a couple ribs and gastralia, which are informative to some regard. And that's it. And so what gets hard in Victoria, particularly, is when I'm looking at what I think is Megaraptorid material, if it doesn't overlap with Australorvenida, then I have to look at the South American stuff. But then the South American stuff is at least 25 to 30 million years younger. So it gets quite difficult at times.
And, with so much missing, I mean, there's most of the dinosaur missing.
Yeah. And I mean, that's a little bit old. We also have the second manual ungual for both hands. We have the radius for the left hand, I think, isn't preserved in that. Pretty much, we know we have at least one of every bone in the hand except for the first two phalanges of the third claw and the third metacarpal. The hind limb, we can put together a full hind limb based on pedal phalanges from both sides. We've got both left and right dentary. There's a few isolated teeth. But yeah, that pretty much well summarizes what Australorvenida is. There's nothing along the backbone. There's not much of the skull. So you're very limited.
Is like guesswork.
And you can see, that's the old composite put together when it was first described in 2009, and that's when they thought Megaraptorans were allosaurs, part of the Neovenataurid lineage. And you can tell because it's got that kind of rounded, I guess, Carcharodontosaurian, allosaurian skull. We don't think they look like that anymore. They're more kind of sleek and straight. I have an example. It's upside down, but something like that. So yeah, our ideas of what these guys are is constantly changing as new material comes out, and particularly in Australia ones, we don't get upper skull material, so it's really hard to know what they're doing.
It's only a matter of time before, and I mean, I'm blanking on the name, but like Velociraptors have them where it's the ring in the eye.
Oh, the scleral rings, yeah.
It may or may not have those. I mean, that's also... It's
so hard to say.
Because those
it's so hard to say in the absence of that material.
Doubt preserve well, so...
Nah. We've not seen anything like it in any of the deposits I've seen. And so much of the theropod material is just not well preserved. I mean,
missing.
the most comprehensive work done on Victorian theropods was in 2012 by Roger Benson, and he looked at, I think, 30 or so bones and then a bunch of teeth. And you can tell from that, like, there's a few nice limb bits, but they're just an isolated femur or an isolated tibia or something else, which is great for determining a group, but that's kind of all it tells you.
yeah, it's like, all right, we found a tooth. We can tell it's a carnivore, but that's it.
Yeah. And so, I mean, for those unfamiliar with Australian theropods, we have 5 valid species from the Cretaceous. Tomimus is just a femur. Kakaru is just a partial tibia. Rapator is a metacarpal one. Sorry, there's only 4. And Australovenator is the only one from more than one bone. There was a 5th. There was Walgetasuchus, which was a really distal caudal vertebrate, but that's no longer considered valid.
Oh, what happened to
I
him?
mean, a really distal caudal vertebrate doesn't really tell you anything. I think someone somewhere said either Curtice or Nomendubium. It's just, there's not enough. And I argue that these other one-bone taxa aren't really informative either. They just create difficulties.
For Abelisaurids, you have...
No Abelisaurids in Australia.
Really?
No. We have, I think, Noasaurids are part of the Abelisauroid lineage, I think, or they're Ceratosaurs. They're somewhere in there. No Abelisaurids like Carcharodontosaurus or any of the Brachiosaurans or anything like that at all yet that I have seen. There was a Ceratosaur astragalus, which I'm pretty sure was reinterpreted as Noasaurid. There's an Elaphrosaur cervical vertebra, but no Abelisaurids. Only very, very recently Carcharodontosaurs, but they're small. And mainly Megaraptorids. So, like, what we confidently know of Australian theropods is Megaraptorids, Noasaurids, Elaphrosaurines, Carcharodontosaurs, Unalagines, and that's really it.
And the Megaraptorids, you said, lived alongside the Carcharodontosaurids.
In parts of South America, particularly Argentina, there are some bits where they're alongside each other. Smaller Megaraptorids alongside, yeah. And then, sorry, Noasaurids aren't Abelisauroids. They're Ceratosaurs. I'm pretty sure. They're closely related. Sometimes people say Abelisauria. Sometimes people say Abelisauroids. Taxonomy is fake. There are places.
It's a mess.
It is. There are places in South America where Megaraptorids and Carcharodontosauridae overlap. There are definitively places where Abelisaurids and Megaraptorids overlap. And then there's places where there's
definitely
Megaraptorids in the Southern Hemisphere. Yep. Here in Australia, in Victoria, you get Megaraptorids alongside Noasaurs, Elaphrosaurs, Unalagines, smaller Carcharodontosaurs. In New South Wales, you get Megaraptorids alongside Noasaurs, and that's all we really know in New South Wales at the minute. And in Queensland, we've only seen Megaraptorids, nothing else definitively yet published. So I don't know. They do really well here. I don't know why anything else doesn't do well. Probably just hasn't preserved. It's probably not the right environments.
And I mean, for the purpose of speaking, if like there was that bridge and they were crossing over, it wouldn't just be them crossing over, but maybe they have a knack for just crossing large distances, spreading territory faster than any other species.
Something that's been brought up a few times, particularly by Matt Lamana, he's shown that Megaraptorids in particular are really, I guess, the dominant group closer to the poles at higher latitudes. So in South America, you get Megaraptorids as the apex predators, I guess, in deposits right at the bottom. And then there's a theoretical line where above that, Abelisaurids are really the dominant. Here in Victoria, I've now seen, small Carcharodontosaurs and big Megaraptorids. I can't tell whether these are actually small-bodied animals or juveniles because there's just not enough to do destructive sampling. But if it is a reverse, then, you've got apex Megaraptorids. If they are part of the Coelurosaur lineage, they might be feathered. Maybe they just do better in the colder environments. I know it's not that cold in the Cretaceous, but it's colder than the rest of the world in this area, particularly in the polar circle. So they might just do better in the cold. And so that's probably why they're able to do a bit more interchange through Australia into South America.
And then is there a specific, I guess, species to the Carcharodontosaurid, or is it still...
No, I don't want to contribute to the one bone taxa problem that Australia already has. So I avoid I avoid species names on things that are not at least a couple of bones. Even then, it's not great, but sometimes the best fossil is the one you have. So you just got to work with what you get. So no, there are no specific species names to the Victorian Carcharodontosaurs. They're part of Carcharodontosauria, which is kind of the wider group, not Carcharodontosauridae, which is the really big ones in parts of the world. So no species name at the minute, no plans unless I find a partial skull or something a bit better than the bottom of a tibia.
There's kind of just
look. I'm looking. I'm trying. I'm doing my best.
I do. It is funny whenever paleontologists are like, all right, here's a full depiction of a dinosaur based on like a footprint. It's like, you need something a little more than that. Come on.
Yeah, look, I get it. It is, and I always see those things like, how do you know that's what it looked like? Again, you do the best you can. Particularly, again, I'll go back to the Megaraptorids. They're all a composite. We don't really know what an individual looks like. I could tell you what Australopithecus' foot and arm looked like. Couldn't tell you the rest of the animal confidently. I could tell you what it might have looked like based on its relatives, but
give suggestive looks, but not definitive.
What would a big cat look like if you took a tiger's limbs, a lion's skull, a panther's backbone? I mean, you'd probably get an idea of a big cat, but how accurate would it be for one species?
I mean, just the lack of I guess. Is there any reason just other than the hollow bones that stuff just doesn't preserve well in Australia?
I don't know. I mean, it's probably environmental issues. It's probably, there might not be many theropods in the environments that are preserving. We might not be looking in the right place. They might just not preserve at all. I couldn't tell you. The problem with Australian geology is that, unlike most of the rest of the world, we don't really have a lot of tectonic activity going on. We're in the middle, close to the middle of a plate. So things like in USA and Canada, you've got a lot of tectonics morphing the geology and getting your Cretaceous outcrops popping out. We don't get that. So all our stuff is just as is deposited. Sometimes it's skewed here and there. But in Victoria, I guess one of the main ones I work on is the Upper Strzelecki group, or the Wonthaggi formation. It outcrops like this. It's exposed at the coastline, and then it goes right under Victoria. And there's a lot of it under Victoria, but you'd have to go into private land and get machinery and dig about 2 kilometers deep to get to it. That might be where the good stuff is, but we can't get there.
Because it's private land? Or
well, it's the machinery ain't cheap. The time ain't cheap. The labor ain't cheap. It's someone's land that they probably don't want dug up. Like there's just so much against how we can do it. And so thankfully the stuff on the coast is part of Parks Victoria land. So we get permits with, natural parks in Victoria, plus Indigenous groups, plus other stakeholders, the museum, the universities and stuff. And we get permission to dig there in volunteer groups. But, that's where we're seeing all these isolated bits at the edge of the river. It might be that the better stuff's deeper down. We just can't get there.
I mean, it's honestly, it's just a matter of time, and because
I think it is. I mean,
you're never going to use material at this point.
No. And particularly what's going on in central Queensland in Winton is it's just so open and so flat. I don't know if you guys have seen what Winton looks like, but it is just blue sky all around and just flat, open land. And a lot of it is Cretaceous rock. And what's happening is they have this stuff called black soil, which is this really crappy dirt that really dries out and forms cracks. And when it rains, water gets through the cracks and it cycles up the material underneath it. So we're now at the point where the Cretaceous rock is underneath the black soil. When it rains, it brings fossils up through the black soil. When you see something exposed, you dig it out and you dig down and you try and find more. That's how they're finding all this good material. There's so much land to look at and so many potential spots. So they're not going to have any shortage of material. And it'll be a matter of time till they dig something up, I think.
When you say Winton, that's just what people think of when you say Australia.
Yeah, Winton is what people think of as Australia. Yeah. Like if you watch the Australian episode of The Simpsons, that's kind of it. It's just a nothing expanse. Yeah, it is I love it out there. I absolutely love it because it's just unlike anything else you see.
I mean,
and look, there's a lot of places in Winton where we can dig, but a lot of it is sheep and cattle farms. So again, it's private property, and there are a couple of people who are willing to let the museum and volunteers come on and dig. And there's a few who aren't. So there's probably a few places where we could find stuff that we just can't access at the minute. And that's fair enough. Not everyone's up for it. So there's, I think it's a matter of time, like you said. We're going to start finding better stuff. We're still cracking at it. Australia's pretty new to the dinosaur game. Our first dinosaur was only found in 1906. Then there's a massive gap. There's a bit done, but it's mostly really kicked off in the 80s and 90s in Victoria, and then the 90s and 2000s in central Queensland. So we're really new to the game.
That's just going to take some time and some digging.
We haven't even had our bone wars yet, so
you get one of those going. Someone just rile up.
I need billions of dollars and a rival with billions of dollars, and we'll go for it.
Yeah, and then they find their stuff, but I mean, for what's there, it's definitely shown that there's diversity more than other places.
We have a unique assemblage. We have something, again, Australia maintains something throughout natural history, it seems, where we're unique and weird compared to the rest of the world. And if it is true that we have no large-bodied theropods, something like Tyrannosaurus or Giganotosaurus, if we have big Megaraptorids, if we have, all this sauropod diversity, if we have a lot of elasmerian ornithopods, if we have that ankylosaur lineage, it's close to South America, but it's still quite unique. So we just keep doing our own thing, it seems.
That's kind of the weird thing about not Australia, but South America is that, like, the thing I say is the Jurassic never died in South America.
Yeah.
Because it just was kind of just gone in North America, except for the closely related ankylosaurs, but that's...
Yeah. No, the way the sauropods drop off in North America is...
You get, like, Alamosaurus, and that's it.
Yeah. Yeah.
But in South America, they just kept going and exploded. Just whatever was there was sustaining them. And then Allosaurids turned into Carcharodontosaurids and Acrocanthosaurus and Giganotosaurus and just all these other things. And I'm sure that carries over into Antarctica and into Australia.
It probably is. I mean, some of the early ideas on Australian dinosaurs was kind of like a refuge for Jurassic stuff. We thought there was an idea that we had a polar allosaur in the Cretaceous. That's now demonstrated to be a Megaraptorid, and that makes sense because we thought Megaraptorids were allosaurs. It's all this stuff. It might be a similar story. And it'll all depend on what we end up finding the Megaraptorids to be eventually when they're finally solved, if you can actually solve group. But, things like the Elaphrosaurs, they're mainly extinct by the end of the Jurassic, except in South America and Australia. You get, I think it's Winklesaurus, and we have our, might be a different one, and then our Elaphrosaur in the Otway group. So there might be a similar story going on in the Southern Hemisphere. And that's, I don't know, that's something I like about it. It's still pretty much, it's like a frontier of dinosaur paleo. Like, there's always new material and new discoveries to be made, but we have a pretty good idea of what's going on, particularly in Northern America.
This is a weird thing to bring up, but Oceania, whatever, it's the kind of lost continent or whatever. If that was around, I'm sure there was stuff on that's just kind of lost.
Yeah, that's what I mean. We're very limited by the deposits we get. I'm sure if we had stuff before the Barremian or after the Cenomanian, Turonian, we'd be able to tell you a lot more about Aussie dinosaurs.
Then how well do you know New Zealand?
Look, when I look outside Australia, my focus is theropods because I'm trying to figure out what the theropods are doing here. So, again, New Zealand doesn't have a great theropod record. I wouldn't be surprised if a Megaraptorid showed up there.
I'm sure that was...
They don't have an amazing dinosaur record. as well.
touching or connecting to Australia in some way.
There was
Who knows?
Gondwana was an expansive continent, and things would have been able to distribute and evolve and spread into different parts of it. So, I don't know much about New Zealand dinosaurs broadly, but I wouldn't be surprised.
And I mean, you recently went on a fossil excavation like 2 weeks ago, 3 maybe.
Yeah, last month. Yeah.
I mean, would you like to share on that, like processes of how it might differ from generic paleo? Fair
enough. I guess so. I was in Winton for my last dig. It was the first time I got to dig up in Winton. That's probably more of your traditional dinosaur dig, getting in the dirt and digging down. They have a bit more access to materials. So the museum was opened and is run by David Elliott, who is a local sheep and cattle farmer. I think he did both. So they have a lot of machinery and equipment from their company and their farms, including a big excavator and mini diggers and stuff. So we actually get machinery in there to help us dig. And you get looking at the black soil, you're seeing where fossils are coming up. You dig under it, you get the fossils out, and you dig deeper to the deposit and just spread out and look around. And you find tons of sauropods. We're looking at a few sites. They opened 2 sites which had a bit of sauropod bit, but not too much else. We went back to a previous site that's given us quite a bit of sauropod and other things. I'm not at liberty to share what's been found there because it's not my work, but there are some exciting new things coming out of that deposit, which will be worked on in future, hopefully soon. That was kind of what Winton was. It's a more traditional dinosaur dig. I've also dug in New South Wales, and I do a lot in Victoria. New South Wales was a little bit different as well. The opalized dinosaur bones come out of opal mines, and you're kind of sorting through heaps. You don't often get into the mines. They're a couple 100 meters deep. Often material is donated by opal miners, and you're sorting through material trying to ID them. Sometimes the museum and universities do get into the mines and dig. I haven't done that personally. But most of what I do is down in Victoria, where our rock is pretty much like cement on the coastline. So we have to go in with angle grinders and other rock saws and crowbars and cut out as much rock as we can while the tide's out, break it up into smaller pieces, put it in buckets, take it up the coast, drive it back to a house, and just chisel into it and look for little bits of bone.
Just spend the afternoon just breaking stuff apart.
And that's what we do. We go as the tide is receding. We extract as much as we can before the tide starts to come back in, because it will cover the ocean will cover the sides. Got to drive it back to the house. We all sit around with cinder blocks, chisels, and cups of tea, and just crack into this stuff until we decide to knock off. And that's just how we dig in Victoria. It's such a strange way to dig.
It's a very unique thing.
Yeah, and look, I mean, a few people have come out and they're like, this is a lot of effort for not a lot of reward, but it's the best stuff we get, and it's the only way we really get dinosaurs in Victoria.
Nice.
So, yeah. It was good to do the Winton dig because I'd not done it before, and it was good to do, I guess, a traditional dinosaur dig rather than rugging up with rain jackets and operating gas-powered rock saws to get through pretty much cement.
And just
pretty much, you just got to cut a square and just pry it out with crowbar and just hope.
That's a crazy work.
It is, and there's so many times where what will be exposed is maybe that much of bone, which will represent something about this big. And so we'll cut what we think is a reasonable enough bit so we don't damage the material. And the amount of times that you underestimate and the saw just goes straight through the bone. I'll send you a link quickly.
What do you do in that situation whenever you just cut through the bone? Is it just done?
It happens. I'll send you a link quickly so you can share it on the video. But one of the recent bits I published on, which was 2 caudal vertebrae plus their chevrons, you can see where the rock saw's gone through it.
Wow, this dinosaur took a lot of damage in its life. No, that was me.
That was Mike. Mike did it. So if you open that link, there should be a 3D viewer.
I'll pull it up.
And you'll be able to see on the front. You'll be able to see on the front vertebra where it's cut through at the top. Can you see the really clean, straight cut that's just gone straight through it? That happens so often. That happens so often. So it actually, with this one, it went through the front of that vertebra, plus it went through the transverse processes on the left side of each of them, which in that case, we could actually, we could measure the width of the blade and get a little bit of putty and just kind of reattach it so you could tell the length of the transverse process, which was helpful. But it's not really helpful when you go through the important bits like the neural canal and part of the centrum.
Yeah, it kind of...
Look, it happens. It happens a lot, and it's part of the game.
You just kind of got to go with it.
You just got to go with it. You can't do anything about it. And I mean, this was particularly weird because it came out of, usually we're digging on the shore platforms, but sometimes there's like boulders that will fall out of the cliff face where the deposit is actually going up into the cliff. And this came out of a boulder about the size of a dinner table. It was just exposed on the surface. So we had to cut out what we thought. And then over 6 months, it was prepared down with an air scribe. I mean, this is after a CT scan where I've sectioned out the bone sort of roughly from the matrix, because there is matrix holding the two vertebrae and the chevrons together. So yeah, this is still attached in matrix.
And other than that, it's just kind of cut and pray you don't rip something apart.
Pretty much. You just hope you don't damage the important parts. I mean, one of our best claws of a Megaraptorid, we call it the Otway claw because it was found on the Otway coast. But you'll see it was cut into 3 bits. Thankfully, with a thinner blade, but you can see this one where it's been cut through and kind of reattached. It's still very informative.
Because I'm sure there's certain things that aren't necessary. Like if you cut through like the middle of a femur, you can kind of tell.
You can sort of reattach the femur, but once you cut through the head, it's like, it's not great. So yeah, there's pros and cons because the rock is so dense, it keeps these little isolated bits together so well. So you can see where the cuts have gone through in 2 places. But it's still a really informative piece.
You can kind of piece it back together like a puzzle, because I'm sure whatever is in Australia, you don't accidentally hit it wrong and it just obliterates.
No, a lot of the stuff, particularly in Victoria, is pretty sturdy because the rock, it's more fragile than the rock it's in. But if you keep some of the stuff in the matrix will protect it. There are bits that will evidently shatter, but there are some sturdier bits. So that's why we get these really nice isolated bones. Unfortunately, we don't get much articulated stuff. Again, those vertebrae you had up before, I think that's the 4th most complete theropod in Australia by merit of bone count, because it's 2 chevrons and 2 caudal vertebrae.
It doesn't count as multiple because it's cut in part.
No. Thankfully, that one's associated. But yeah, we have Australoveneta, the legs, the hands, and the jaw. Then you get lightning claw, I think, is second, which is the back of a claw, a rib, a metatarsal 3, the top of an ulnar, and the bottom of an ilium. Then you get another Megaraptorid from Winton, which is just a couple of caudal vertebrae and some...
not been named yet.
I think no, that one won't be named. The problem is we can't say whether it is or isn't Australoveneta because there's barely any overlap. The bits that do overlap are the bottom of the radius, which doesn't really tell you much. After that is, so it's Australoveneta, lightning claw, those vertebrae, then that tail that you just saw, and then 2 pubic bones, and then everything else is 1 bone. So
wow.
It really limited.
There's a lot of guesswork.
It's a lot of, that's why a lot of our focus is on diversity of theropods rather than individual theropod taxa.
Yeah, that's...
Whereas, ornithopods, particularly in Victoria, we get associated hips, tails, legs, the lot. You get partial skulls, you get dentaries, you get heaps.
So are those ones you tend to find more articulated?
Yeah, there's a good few examples of articulated ornithopods in Victoria. I think Diluvicus was one of the best. It is the hips, the legs, the tail, like a complete tail. There's a partial tail probably for Lialinosaura. There's the brain case of Lialinosaura. There's heaps of bits, and we find so much ornithopod material and a lot of associated. So we know quite a bit about them.
And of course,
theropods, theropods, different story.
Sauropods that preserve well.
Yeah, sauropods up in Winton preserve so well. Like there are so many femora or humerus or.
So is that like the most common thing? Would be the sauropods, Winton?
So in Winton, sauropods, yes. In Victoria, ornithopods. Like if we're just focusing dinosaurs, yeah, that's the most of what you find. We don't actually get sauropods in Victoria at all. And it's thought, again, my supervisor Steve, some of the theories he's put is that sauropods don't seem to like the cold and high latitudes. And at the time of our deposits in Victoria, it's pretty cold for the Cretaceous. So they don't want to be here. We've not found any evidence of a sauropod over 40 years of collecting. You'd think after that we would have found one. Not even a tooth, not a shard of limb, nothing. So they're not here. But they had to get to Queensland and to South America, considering Diamantinosaurus and Sarmientosaurus were related. So there is a point of interchange where it warmed up and they were able to distribute through. Which way they went, I don't know. It would, considering how many sauropods there are in South America, you'd think they went from South America to Australia. It's hard to say. Again, you're limited by what you have, but yeah, sauropods in Queensland, ornithopods in Victoria. Theropods always struggle. Theropods are never the best anyway.
So theropods are you just find them and it's like striking gold.
Pretty much. And that's why something like Australoveneta was so exciting, because it's our only associated name taxon.
Yeah, because everything else, it seems, hasn't been found enough to get an individual name or just...
Look, I
don't really know.
I'd argue Lightning Claw probably is worth it. It's just an informal name, but there's enough of it, and it's like the deposit it's from has been demonstrated to be separate from the Winton Formation, so it could probably be done. But I wouldn't do anything beyond that. There's not enough of anything else. And it's always hard when it's the same deposit because, those vertebrae from Winton probably could have been named based on Australian theropod standards, but because it's from the same formation as Australoveneta, can't say it is or isn't, and you don't want to make headaches. Nobody wants to name the dinosaur that's just going to become a junior synonym of something else.
Everybody wants to find their own species, but they don't ever want to have to rename it.
You want your species to last.
Indeed, because it's so fun looking at taxon and then you see something that has like 60 different names and you're like, oh, I think I know what happened there.
Yeah. And I mean, you can even look at it. There's a table from a paper in 2019 on Victorian theropods, and you can look at it. You could trace the astragalus where it's like Allosaurus spur, Allosauroidea, Megaraptora, Megaraptoridate, Megaraptorquery, Allosauridae again, Megaraptora. It's just so much being reinterpreted.
And now they're not Allosaurids anymore. They're
either Coelurosaurs or Tyrannosaurids, apparently.
It was so weird for a while. I remember them as like, oh, there's Allosaurus in Australia, and I was like, oh, that's cool. And it's like, no, it's more accurate to say they're Tyrannosaurs in Australia.
Yeah,
as of right now, just give it a couple.
Look, the most recent phylogenies are saying Megaraptorids are Tyrannosauroids. My own work has found that they probably are. They might be. There are some key features that they're probably early branching Tyrannosauroids. I wouldn't be surprised if they were early branching Coelurosaurs either, but I don't think they're Allosaurs. I think they're Coelurosaurs that look like Allosaurs.
Because I mean, because it's really hard to say just basing it off of looks. Because even the distant just basic raptors that we have, dromaeosaurs, their hips look like ornithischian dinosaurs, which is just like, okay, why are they not in that tree? And it's like, so just basing it off of looks and not where.
That's it. You can't just you got to go into the weird taxonomy and phylogeny stuff. And I mean, there's some pretty big ones, like the front of the tibia on Megaraptorids is flat, and that's a coelurosaur thing. I mean, some noasaurs I think have it, but allosaurs are really sculpted. They got this real defined ridge that braces the astragalus, whereas coelurosaurs have a flat one, and it's in all coelurosaurs. So as one thing tells you Megaraptorids are coelurosaurs. And Megaraptorids, it seems like the ones from Thailand have flat anterior faces. So, don't know.
It's just gonna take.
It's hard to say. We need. It's gonna take. We need a composite. Not a composite. We need a more complete Megaraptorid that kind of draws in all the bits and tells you exactly what they are.
If you find
and
one just articulated specimen, that will just answer so many questions.
You need one with most of the skull, a forelimb and a hind limb, and some vertebrae, and it'll answer all the questions. It'll be able to draw them all together. Because at the minute, you can see Australovenator and Megaraptor with the forelimb plus of the hind limb. You can see Erosteon and Australovenator with the hind limb. But yeah, like I said, you can't do Trodiania, you can't do Mape. You can do a little bit of Orcaraptor, but not much. You're very limited by what you can do.
I mean, and then you have Mape in there, which is relatively new, but relatively, I think that one's South American. I might be wrong on that.
It is.
Which
pretty much all
better in South America for whatever reason.
All the named Megaraptorids, there's one from Australia and then the rest are Argentina, I'm pretty sure. I don't think there's one. Like, they're all South American, but I don't think there's one outside of Argentina that's been named. They're all, I'm pretty sure they're all Argentinian. So if you're going to find a complete one, it's going to be there. They'll beat us. I don't think we'll get one before they do.
Yeah, well, they
not based on our track record. Well, they have. I mean, Megaraptor's got a couple of neotypes. Theirs are a lot better than ours. They get brain cases. They get, the really important, informative bits. Whereas, the hind limb and the forelimb are informative, but the skull is your real kicker.
Everybody also wants to see the skull.
Everyone wants to see the skull.
Always wants to see the skull. I mean, that's just the most interesting part, and that might be something really strange about Australovenator, that it had a skull. I was gonna say, I was like, but who knows? Maybe its skull just completely flips, that it's like not related to Megaraptor somehow. I mean, I doubt it, but who knows?
I think there's enough in the forelimb to unequivocally say it's a Megaraptorid. I mean, the way the metacarpal one and the digits of the claws are, they're pretty killer, like 1-to-1 almost at times. But the skull could look completely different, and it might be,
definitively say which one. I don't want to say came from which, because it could have been any number of Megaraptorid species. It could be one that we haven't discovered yet that it really came from, which is the most likely thing. But
look, I mean, that's why the Victorian stuff is so important. I know I've said a lot that it's isolated fragmentary bits, but they are the oldest Megaraptorids. So the first time they show up in the geologic record, and they, when it is a bit that overlaps, it can tell us quite a bit. Like again, with that paper I published earlier this year, there's a tibia, like it's a distal end of a tibia, but it's 5% larger than Australovenator's. It's significantly more robust. It looks a bit more like a South American tibia, Megaraptorid tibia, than Australovenator's. So there's something linking the groups in Victoria. That claw is it's a dead ringer for a Megaraptorid from the Otway Coast. So these isolated bits still tell you something. And they I guess, a missing link between the South American ones and Australia.
There's obviously a missing link, but
yeah, we just need to keep digging and need to keep finding more. I think it's a matter of time. Like those two, that tibia and those tail vertebrae, they're by size, the largest individual bones found in Victoria of a dinosaur. So, and that's a first in 40 years. So who knows what else is hiding out there?
Yeah, I mean, Yeah, it's been what 40 years for Australia. It's been at least 100 for almost everywhere else.
That's what I mean. The UK's had so much time. Europe's had so much
Yeah,
time. The US had
UK.
the Bone Wars and so much. Like, you guys get such good preserved material.
UK shot it all to start with. So with Megalosaurus, so they've just been going since.
They've been going for a while,
forever.
and it's also the preservation, like the stuff coming out of Asia, particularly China, Mongolia, and all that is just ridiculous.
Oh, they're whatever's in their soil is really rich with that.
Yep.
So,
and we haven't found a deposit like that. I don't know if we will, but you got to work with what you get. Hey,
and I mean, it's just the luck of the draw, and
pretty much
go there.
Again,
expect to find nothing. Be excited when you find anything.
Look, I've gone to the cliff and the boulders where those two big Megaraptorid bits were found. I've been about 12 times since. I haven't found anything else. I'm going to keep going. Like, there is nothing else in that rock that we've seen. So I think there might be more of it, whether it's in boulders underneath the stuff that's already eroded off or whether it's still on the cliff. I'd like to know. But I don't know. I have nothing but a hunch and a hope that there's more of it there.
I mean, you just gotta layer it all back until you find it, or
pretty much.
May never find it, and it's
pretty much. It might already be eroded away. I don't know. I don't know if we'll ever find more of that tibia because the top where it's broken is what was exposed. So it's either still in the cliff, snapped off, or it was part of this boulder and it's just been eroded away over time because it's on the coastline. It's eroding quite quickly.
Yeah, I'm sure the water coming in and washing everything.
Yeah.
Oh, I'm sure that helps so much.
Yeah. It's a blessing and a curse because it exposes the deposit, but then it rips the stuff up so quickly. Particularly footprints. We get so many footprints on these shorelines that we have to kind of mold and make replicas of because it'll disappear in a couple months.
You just gotta quickly act before.
Just got to do what we can.
It's gone forever.
Pretty much.
But I mean, outside of that, what is the favorite part of what you do?
Look, I mean, at the start, it was just cool working on dinosaurs. It was, it's most kids' dream to be a paleontologist. I'm one of those kids who could spell paleontologist in grade 2, and my teachers couldn't. But throughout the course of this and having to become a specialist in Megaraptorids, because it's so much of what we find, it's, I get to be on the forefront of a group that's relatively new. Not many people work on Megaraptorids. They're only known from Australia and South America. Every new bit is important. If I was to come to the US and dig up a Tyrannosaurus femur, cool. You already know what the Tyrannosaurus femur looks like. Yeah, it's a cool experience, but the wider literature, it's not beneficial. With Megaraptorids, most of the time, it's something new that we haven't had before.
Literally anything you find is
those caudal vertebrae. Those vertebrae are published on. Yes, there are caudal vertebrae in Megaraptorids, but they're the only ones that I could find from the mid-posterior region of the tail. So they're a new addition to the composite. That frontal, it's one of 4, but it's 25 million years older than the next one. So it gives you a piece of we can understand how the frontal changes through evolution. Every bit's important. Every bit's informative. It's not often that you get to be on the forefront or the frontier of a new group of dinosaurs. New to human science group of dinosaurs. So
they're older than us technically, but
pretty much. So
that's new to our knowledge.
That's what it is for me. And I mean, it's every kid's dream to work with dinosaurs, and the fact you get to work with dinosaurs every day is pretty cool.
I mean, that's just like how it is. I mean, a lot of people are just like, it's not even an option, but
you can make it an option. There's always a way to make it happen.
It is.
And look, I'm getting to that point where I've got to submit my thesis and start considering the next options. And it is scary. It is terrifying because there aren't that many options, but I'm hopeful I can make it work. I mean, if I have to, I will get a 9-to-5 job just to pay bills and do this as a hobby. if I have to. I'd love to keep involved in this. I'm hopeful I can get something worked out long term, and it sounds like there might be. So you just do the best work you can and hope for the best.
It's just how it is. So, I mean, I guess the final question I really have right now is like, why dinosaurs? Why Megaraptorids specifically?
Like, why do I like them so much, or
Just-
why do I?
Why do you like them so much? Why are you so dedicated to them? Why choose this field?
I don't know what it is about dinosaurs. There's just something about them that captures my imagination. It's, there's something about, and I think with theropods in particular, there's something about a group of animals that have no modern analog, that no longer exist. There's nothing like them at all since, I guess there's terror birds, I guess you could consider as big predatory theropods, but there's nothing like Tyrannosaurus. There's nothing like Giganotosaurus. There's nothing like a bipedal predator like a dromaeosaur or a megaraptorid anymore. It's something that you're just trying to figure out what it was doing with no comparative analog, and I think there's something special and exciting in that. And for me, I always loved the large macro-predatory theropods, Tyrannosaurus, Giganotosaurus, Spinosaurus, etc. But you learn to work with what you're given, and I'm not getting any of those in Australia. I'm getting Megaraptorids, and at the start, I was frustrated. It's like I'd like to work on something new, but over time, as I've worked on Megaraptorids, I've gained an appreciation and love for them, because it's like, okay, this is a group not many people know about. There's not a lot of fossils. We're on the frontier. Every bit is new and exciting. So that's what it is for me. It's just the ability to get new information on a relatively poorly understood group. Is just so damn exciting.
It's literally anything you find in the field is like
Anything could be
addition.
Anything could be a Rosetta Stone for a part of the body of a Megaraptorid. Until someone finds this partially associated one, anything is super helpful.
I mean, that's got to be super, just like you find anything, it's fulfilling instantly. Yeah, that's what I'm guessing. So
it is. And look, I mean, I'm crap in the field. I've dug in 3 states across 5 dig sites. No, sorry, 3 states, 6 dig sites, 7 weeks of digging, and I found 1 bone. And it was only in winter. And it was on the last day of the dig, and I was absolutely filthy. I was in the easiest place to find a dinosaur in the country, and I hadn't found anything. Everyone else in the dig, there was about 14 of us, everyone had found a bone of something, and I had found nothing. And I've got my geo-pick, and I'm sitting in my own little pit in the dirt. I'm just cracking it. I'm like, I hate this. This is the worst. I'm just going at this dirt. I'm going bang, bang. Crap. And I put my geo-pick through a shard of bone, and it was just a tiny little bit like this. But I finally found a bone. So I can't find stuff. I'm dreadful at it. I rely on other people to find the stuff for me. But when they find the stuff, it's super exciting, and I get to keep them involved in the work. There's a good thing that happens in Victoria pretty often, is that a lot of our fossils are found by volunteers. And when it's something that represents a new species, it's often named for the volunteer. So I don't know how much you know about temnospondyls, but we have the latest surviving temnospondyle in Victoria, Coolosuchus. They don't really make it past the Jurassic, but we have one in the Cretaceous in Victoria for some reason.
Wow.
And so the full name is Coolosuchus clearlandi. Coolosuchus for Leslie Cool, one of the organisers and volunteers and who prepared the fossil, and Clearlandi for Mike Clearland, who actually found it and pulled it out of the rock.
That's actually pretty cool.
And it happens so frequently, and it's great to see. There's a mammal jaw called Corybatar for Cory, who found it by chiseling. It's a really good thing. It's a good way to keep people involved, and it's rewarding for them.
Yeah, I mean, it's like not many people can say like, "Oh, I have a
dinosaur named after me." Yeah, pretty much.
If you can say that, bro, like wow.
Yeah, and it's
Conversation
great. It's great because, you know, they're finding all this really important stuff, but they don't have the, sometimes they're not interested, or sometimes they don't have the expertise, or sometimes, you know, it's just not their thing. They can't take it beyond collection and preparation. That's where they rely on paleontologists to get it out into the public and into academia. So it's a good way to keep them involved.
Absolutely. And I mean, it also kind of encourages people to come out with stuff and be like, hey, I also found this.
And that's exactly what it is. And it happens all the time. It's quite hard in the Victorian Cretaceous stuff because it's so hard to ID and spot and collect. But we have, you know, younger deposit stuff throughout the, I think it's the Oligocene. We get toothed baleen whales. And there's a lot of people who've collected stuff and come forward with stuff and donated to museums. So, yeah, it just encourages public engagement.
And it's always rewarding to find literally anything, because it's just,
it's when you pull a fossil out, you're the first person to ever see it. You're often the first living thing to see it in millions of years, and it's pretty cool. Even if it's just a little shard or a little tooth, it's like no one has seen that before you have.
it is definitively you're the first human being to ever touch that.
Yep, and it's cool. It's, you know, it's something that once lived and breathed like you do, was behaving in an environment. And I think that's where a lot of people forget the distinction between a fossil and the animal, is that a lot of people see it as a bone and it's a fossil, and, yeah, you prepare it, describe it, and all that. But this once represented something that lived and breathed and existed in an environment, and an environment very different to the one we have today. There's just something special about it.
But I mean, it was great having you on. If there's anything you'd like to say before we close out here,
get to know your Australian dinosaurs. We, particularly Aussies listening, I've given quite a few talks and gone on a few interviews, and people just don't know about our record. Our record is great. It's important. It's improving every day. Get to know your Aussie dinosaurs. Get to know your Gondwanan dinosaurs. There's more stuff than just T-Rex. And, you know, for all of those aspiring paleontologists who, you know, don't think it's a viable option, don't think you can do it, you can make it work. I'm in one of the hardest places to find anything dinosaur, and I'm making it work. There's always a way through if you really want to do it.
You're in one of the hardest places to find dinosaurs, trying to find one of the hardest dinosaurs to find in a new field. It's possible.
Pretty much. It's possible. You can make it work. There's always a way to make it work.
But it was great having you on. Before we close out, here's his Instagram one last time. Go check it out.
Yeah, enjoy the comics by my mate Zev. He sketched up some little informative bits on the paper that I recently put out. So, yeah, I'm horrible at updating it, but I try to be better, particularly around when new research is coming out.
But I mean, go support him anyways.
Follow me for Aussie dinosaur stuff.
learn your Aussie dinosaurs. Learn all of your
Pretty
dinosaurs.
much.
Stay away from
all of your dinosaurs and then learn the Aussie ones.
Yeah, just there's more than like basic 9. Come on.
Yeah.
But that is all from me. If there's anything.
No, that's all. Thank you so much for having me on the show. Thanks for reaching out.
Thanks for
coming. Great to have a chat, and you know, I always love the opportunity to talk about dinosaurs.
It's always an honor to get somebody that's outside of the like bubble that, you know, like I'm on the East Coast of America, so we get nothing.
Yeah.
We get shark teeth and mammals.
Yeah.
But
yeah.
It's always cool to talk to somebody out west and talk about the Jurassic and the Cretaceous, the famous ones. But it's always a real treat, and it's always really interesting to hear people from other places too, to get that broader spectrum.
Oh, 100%. I mean, ultimately, we're all benefiting each other. We're all improving the knowledge of dinosaurs. And there was a point where they're all interconnected and linked through the Cretaceous, through the Triassic in Pangaea. So as far separated as Tyrannosaurus and Australoveneta might be, there is a point where they are related. and it all contributes to the story and our understanding of dinosaurs.
But I mean, you just got to keep digging, keep finding, and that's
Just gotta keep digging.
That's that. I mean,
That's it.
But thanks for coming on. I'm your host, Eric.
Sure. Thanks for having me.
Signing off. This has been Prehistoric Life Podcast. Remember, keep it prehistoric. Goodbye.